make this full press conference available to anyone that wants it. I'm going to drop my contact information into the chat in a few moments, and you're welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to email you a copy of the recording after this press conference. With that being said, I'm going to ask that all of you hold your questions until after the speakers have spoken, and then we will happily take any questions that you may have. Probably the best way for us to accomplish that will be for you to use the raise hand feature in your Zoom. So when we start to open up for questions, if you'll just raise your hand, and we'll make sure we get to everyone that way. And now it's my privilege to introduce to you the chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. And she is particularly important today because she is the first Black woman to hold this position for the Oklahoma Democratic Party. And it's a pleasure to work with her and to welcome her now. This is Alicia Andrews, chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party.
Hi, am I highlighted? Hi, my name is Alicia Andrews, and I'm the chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. I am thrilled to be joined today by other leaders in the Oklahoma Democratic Party. I am joined by Twan Jones, who is the chairman of Congressional District 1, Amber Jensen, the chairwoman of Congressional District 3, John Bilberry, the chairman of Congressional District 5, Robbie White, the chairwoman of Oklahoma County Democrats, and Amanda Swope, the chairwoman of Tulsa County Democrats, and last but absolutely not least, Dave Radcliffe, who is the vice chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. And they will be available for questions after a brief statement by me. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us on what is an absolutely gorgeous day, glorious day, as the Oklahoma Democratic Party celebrates the inauguration of President Joseph R. Biden and Vice President Kamala D. Harris. We are celebrating this with jubilation. Today, we saw the ushering in of a hope personified by President Biden and Vice President Harris. Today's pomp and circumstance, those rituals that we've come to know were more than that this year. This year, just 2 weeks after, as President Biden said, we face forces that would rather destroy our country than share it. Those rituals took on different meaning. Our democracy was threatened from within, and today our nation swore in two people who obviously love her. My screen's doing crazy things. Hope you can still see me. The history made today is not lost on us. It's not lost on me in particular. The president and vice president take office after receiving the most amount of votes in history. Vice President Kamala Harris enters the office as the first woman, the first person of African descent, the first person of Indian descent to hold the office of vice president. President Biden intends to have the most diverse cabinet in history, as evidenced by his nominations. This is how you heal a nation. Representation matters, and seeing someone that you can identify with breeds respect, hope, and belonging. President Biden made a call for unity. Though I support our new president, I call for unity after accountability. Those that threatened our democracy a mere 2 weeks ago must be held to account. The effect of today's election on Oklahoma is likely to be far-reaching. We have an opportunity to shift focus from division to unity. Issues facing Oklahoma today include economic distress, racial injustice, and uncertain access to education. Some of the president's first policy moves include extending the eviction moratorium, creating an earned roadmap to citizenship for undocumented individuals, and extending student loan relief. These issues directly affect Oklahoma citizens today in a positive manner. The Oklahoma Democratic Party joined a grateful nation in celebrating this historic election. Thank you. Any questions?
So I'll throw one out since nobody else will. In 2008, when President Obama was elected, it caused a pretty serious backlash against the Democratic Party in Oklahoma. And we saw a preoccupation in state government with with what was going on in Washington and not so much what was going on in Oklahoma. Are we going to see the same thing, you think, with President Biden? Is there going to be a backlash against the Democratic Party in Oklahoma?
I think out the gate, there will be, because it's so close on the heels of the failed coup attempt from 2 weeks ago. However, because of Biden's first moves, people will have economic relief. And I think people will be, I hope people will be occupied with those positive changes that are going to be happening in their life, and too occupied with that to be continuing with the division that we've lived through. Amanda, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I think so. I hope that we don't. I think that given the events that we did see at the Capitol, that would deter a lot of people from wanting to be involved on the other side, and that would maybe make them more likely to engage with Democrats or people that are more progressive in this area. I think throughout all of last year, we saw a good amount of people already coming to the Democratic Party that were Republicans, that were willing to, change their registration and leave the party because of that president's actions. And they definitely haven't gotten better since I had those conversations with people. So I'm at least hopeful that this will drive more engagement for the Democratic Party in Oklahoma.
McKenna Eubank has a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Ms. Andrews, you went into a little bit of detail about how Biden's moves in his first 100 days could directly impact Oklahoma. Can you go into some more detail about that, about how you expect to see effects here locally?
Well, absolutely. So both Tulsa and Oklahoma County saw just record numbers of eviction notices filed. And I think that an extension of the eviction moratorium will, it is my hope that people will have some economic relief, and it will lessen the panic. And when you can know that you have a safe place to lay your head at night, I think that also breeds hope. Dave, would you like to add anything to that? Dave, you're muted.
Sorry, there we go. Yes, I don't know which part I'm referring to, whether or not I think we'll see gains in Oklahoma or if we'll see the backlash in Oklahoma. Which one?
Gains.
Gains. Yes, I do believe that we are going to see some gains, and I think that, unfortunately, the majority is not always favorable to Oklahoma's working families, but I think that this will be a wake-up call to them. And I think with the overwhelming, voter registration swings, that I think a lot of them, and I have talked to many people who are legislators who historically had not been friendly to working families, and I think they are waking up, and they also understand that the tide is shifting. And I think what we're seeing out there is great feelings of hope. And I think more than, and I think it will trickle down, just like we have seen what goes on in DC trickle down. I think we're going to see what's going on trickling down. And I think we are going to see some great improvements in obviously our economic recovery, but also in criminal justice reform and many other areas that we're going to see improvements. And we will see a trickle down effect here in Oklahoma.
Chris Polanski has a question.
Thank you, Scott. I'm with the NPR station in Tulsa, for those who don't know me. Thank you for taking the question. One way this is different than when President Obama took office is that this time around, there is a very, very significant portion of Republicans who don't believe who believe the lie that the election was stolen, that there was fraud. What do you make of that, and how do you respond to that? I mean, I contacted the state GOP before this call. They won't even go on record admitting that Joe Biden is the legitimate president. How do you work in this environment?
So firstly, I want to say shame on them. I want to say shame on them. It has been decided. And the fact that we have a thing that we call the big lie rests so squarely with the Republican Party, both nationwide and here in Oklahoma. And it is a big lie. And I believe that the leaders of the Republican Party have had ample opportunity to tell their constituents the truth, right? And, you know, sometimes the truth hurts, but in leadership, we have to tell the truth. And the truth is, though Donald Trump received a lot of votes, he did not receive the most votes. And that's just how democracy works. And he had a right to challenge his election, and he exhausted that right, over 60 challenges. And it came back that there was no widespread fraud. And the fact that the Oklahoma GOP continues to tout the big lie is shameful. And all it does is it leads to dissatisfaction amongst their constituents. They will continue to be unhappy as long as no one tells them the truth. John, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, basically, I agree with our chair 100%. It's a big lie. There's nothing we can do other than try and make sure that people understand what the truth is. The truth is the biggest thing that will overcome a lie. And for a long time, I don't understand why the GOP want to take this route. Seems like they're losing people. They're losing people left and right because of that lie. But here in Oklahoma, I know it's a big controversy with all 5 of our representatives voting to disenfranchise voters. That's a lot. You know, you have to look at it from the other side of the fence too. What if the other states decide to gang up on Oklahoma and challenge our voting process? You know, that's not the way democracy works. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Thank
you. Another question from KWTV. Chris, did you have a follow-up? I'm sorry.
No, I just said thank you, Scott.
We have a question from KWTV. I don't know who the reporter is. It just says video.
Sorry about that. That's this is the computer we use for Zoom calls. My name is Barry Mangold. I'm a reporter with News 9 at KWTV. Thanks for taking the question. I wanted to ask kind of a follow-up to what Chris's question is. I just on the topic of whether or not the state GOP or Republicans at large believe that Joe Biden lawfully won this election. How do you approach that from a recruitment standpoint, from a standpoint of trying to flip voters blue? How do you approach that situation? How do you approach the big lie with that in mind?
It's my belief that you start out by telling the truth. So the reason why the big lie prevails is that there are people who are unhappy, and there are people who, although I do not understand it, do not feel heard, because for the last 4 years, they've had the biggest bullhorn that there is. They absolutely have been heard. And some of those beliefs have been spouted from the highest Twitter account possible, but they still aren't feeling heard. And then the reality is we address Oklahoma issues. In Oklahoma, as I said before, you know, we're facing economic distress. The Oklahoma Democratic Party is the party that is looking at dealing with economic distress by trying to raise the minimum wage. The Oklahoma Party is the party that's looking at expanding access to affordable health care. And if we address people as they are people at the issues that mean something to them, I think that we can make an impact. And at the bottom of everything is, how is it going to affect me? And I think that people will deal with how it affects them, and that's how we can do recruitment. Robbie, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I do. Thanks, Alicia. what we're focusing on in Oklahoma County is telling our story of why we are Democrats. And when you start to talk on a very personal level about policies that are important to you as a Democrat that affect, as Alicia said, the lives of everyday Oklahomans, it starts to make an impact. When we have for too long allowed the GOP in Oklahoma and elsewhere to define us, to scream loudly, telling us who we are. And that is no longer being tolerated. We are the party that cares. We have policies that are good for people. And Alicia hit on a lot of those. But we are hurting in Oklahoma. We have one of the highest COVID positivity rates in the world. And the Republican leadership seems to not care enough to employ basic science to fight this. So there are a lot of conversations we can have, but the ones that really work that I found, and I think my fellow Democrats could have their own stories to tell, but the ones that get through that information bubble are the ones that are authentic and very personal.
Understood. Thank you both for the answer. I do have one second question, if I may. I did miss the very beginning of the Zoom call, and so I just was wondering if Alicia, you could go over again, kind of what are the priorities that Biden has laid out in that, primarily in that first kind of the massive $1 trillion+ plan that he's laid out that has minimum wage covered, covers evictions, kind of things that you've already mentioned. What are the elements of that plan that will be the most impactful to Oklahomans in the first 100 days? And I guess, is there anything in there that you wish was taken out?
So I'm a positive girl, so I'm gonna stick with the things that excite me for the Oklahoma population. Number one is a livable minimum wage. As Dave mentioned earlier, we have got to take care of our working families. A person shouldn't work full time and live below the poverty line. And in Oklahoma, although we have a reasonable we have a reasonable cost of living, still at $7.25 an hour, you're below the poverty rate. Most people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet if they're a frontline worker. So what we need to do is raise our minimum wage. The eviction moratorium, as I said earlier, in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County, we've seen a record number of evictions filed. We can't really allow that to happen, but there also must be relief for the landlords, and he has something in there for landlords. Because if you allow folks to be be without homes, I hate the term homeless, allow folks to be without homes, then you have another crisis that you have to deal with, and we can't just keep letting crises build up. Those are the two that I'd like to focus on as they relate to Oklahoma. Juan, did you want to add anything?
Well, thanks, Alicia, Madam Chair, and thank you, Barry, for that question. I think in that plan, what will help Oklahomans that the President Biden has shown that he cares about working class people. He cares about the low and poor class in Oklahoma. I think they will find that they have a president now that believes in the people of the United States and not just the 1% upper class and the elitists. I think he has taken out all the hatred that Donald Trump has put into policies. So there's nothing else that we need to take out, because President Biden was clear that he was not interested in further dividing the people of Oklahoma, the people of the United States. So we're proud that we have a president now that believes in the United States of America and not a president who has no moral compass. So we are happy with his plan. There is nothing in his plan that we are upset about.
Thank you, Juan. I'd like to bring Jason Nichols, our chair of Congressional District 2, to bring in more of a rural take on that question, if you don't mind, Jason.
Well, I think that the thing that rural voters need to take into account, and really all voters, but certainly we feel it in the rural areas, make a contrast, compare what was done in the previous administration with trillions of dollars worth of tax cuts compared to what's taking place in the first few days of this one. And you can see where the priorities are. Rather than trying to hand a lot of money to people who already have a lot of money, there's an effort being made to help people who just go to work and from 8 to 5 every day or whatever their shift is, and are just trying to make the ends meet. And I think that that's going to resonate with rural voters and here in the eastern part of Oklahoma, but just as well in the urban areas and the rest of the United States. I think that those are the effects of that, the comparison that can be made, it's going to speak volumes in the midterms and again when it's time for Biden to seek re-election.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Tyler Butler from KTUL, thanks for your patience. Tyler, you go.
That's fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. First up here, I've got kind of a two-parter. So first up here in Oklahoma, a lot of Oklahomans did not vote for this president. Some are, pretty concerned when they're watching the inauguration today and expressing their fears about the next 4 years. So what are you saying to those people?
So my first question is, I watched it probably not with an unbiased eye, but I can't imagine how you could have watched that inauguration and had to even starting last night when we had the commemoration of the lives that were lost. Everything that President Biden and Vice President Harris are talking about is unity and moving forward and taking care of America. So yes, I do know that there's 1 million folks in Oklahoma who voted for Donald Trump. That's how elections work, and it's time for us all to move forward. Donald Trump is not going to be president for the next 4 years, and so it's time for us all to move forward. And we've all survived living under a president that we didn't vote for. Does anybody else want to jump in? I see silence. That's why I call on y'all.
Amber's got her hand up.
Amber.
I will jump in here. I think that when a new president comes in, there's always going to be some uncertainty among people who did not vote for that president. And I think that by and large, the general population will always, as a whole, start to follow the spirit of that leader. So if that spirit is, like in the case of Donald Trump, if that spirit is of hatred and bullying, that's how the population is going to start behaving. In the case of Biden, it's going to be more of a unifying message. It's going to be more of compassion. It's going to be more of caring for your neighbor. And so we have to give it some time for these people that did not vote for Joe Biden. We have to give it some time for them to get used to the idea that I vote for him, but he is my president now. Because like my Madam Chair said, everybody has had to live through a presidency where they didn't vote for the guy that won. Like that's just a fact of life. But we all follow, as a country, we follow the spirit of our leader, and the spirit of the current leader that was just sworn in today at noon is one of sanity and unity and compassion. And I think that if we give them some time, that will become the spirit of America again.
Alicia, can I?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, did you say go, Alicia, or no? Okay. Yes, and I agree with everything that both of y'all have said. It's just becoming incredibly frustrating over these last 12 years. Politics has become so divisive, and just as much so here in Oklahoma. And also it's frustrating that the right has started defining what it means to be a Democrat, and they have made Democrat and socialist interchangeable. And that is far from the truth. I've had conversations with some of my neighbors, because I have Biden signs. And then I asked one of my neighbors, what is it you don't like about Biden? And he says, well, I'm against all things socialist. I said, really? All things socialist? And he said, well, yes, absolutely, all things. I said, well, then I guess we are ideologically different, because unlike you, I am pro-public education. I am pro-police, pro-military, pro-fire, and pro-many other programs that are socialist in nature. And then this neighbor, oh, really? Those are socialist in nature? Yes, absolutely they are. So, and then I go on to explain what a country needs to be great is a happy mixture of capitalism and social programs. And hopefully, I think people will start coming around with this, with our new president, and seeing that, yes, in fact, we do need, some social programs, and it's not necessarily socialism, it's social programs. So.
And Tyler, you had a second part to your question, correct?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up here, and you might have mentioned this already. I missed the first 10 minutes with the wrong link. But with Kendra Horn no longer being in office, although we have a Democrat president, Oklahoma no longer has a Democrat in Congress, at least for the next 2 years. Do you think that'll change as we look ahead 2 more years?
I do. I think that having a Democrat as president will give Oklahoma Democrats hope. We were so beleaguered, and I think the Democrats will have hope now. I know that having a Democrat as president is absolutely going to make it easier to recruit candidates. When there's hope that, people are willing to fight. I know that there's a Democrat president and volunteers are out there and donors are out there and they're ready to get involved. And so I anticipate in the 2022 cycle that we will have absolutely qualified candidates that are willing to fight, who have the capacity to win and who will win.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Chris Castile from the Oklahoman. How are you this afternoon, Chris?
I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. That was the most direct language I've ever heard a president use in an inauguration speech, I think, or anywhere about racism. He even talked about white supremacy. And I was wondering what you all thought about his direct mention of that. I'm sure some of it had to do with January 6th, but and how prevalent do you think white supremacy is in this state?
Wow, I have a mixed answer for that. First of all, I am thrilled that we have a president who's willing to deal with America's first sin head on, and because you can't deal with anything that you won't admit exists, and the fact that he actually put it in his inauguration speech and spoke on it means that we have an opportunity to literally start working towards healing. So that is awesome. I have mixed feelings because the fact that he's still here in 2021 have to talk about it. And in Oklahoma, it is a real issue. But I think that there is work that's still to be done. I know the Oklahoma Democratic Party is making efforts towards this, and I hope that the rest of Oklahoma will be ready. I am, though, going to defer to Twan Jones, the chair of Congressional District 1, to add some comments to this.
I think in Oklahoma, thank you, Madam Chair. I think in Oklahoma, we have to face the reality and the true fact that we have a lot of racists here. And when you look at the leadership that we have in Washington, D.C., they continue to promote the divisive nature of the outgoing president. That is insane. We must change that dynamic here in Oklahoma. We will continue to see it because our leaders in Washington, D.C. are still promoting it. When they stop promoting it, maybe we will see some change. Langford, Mullins, all of them, they need to change their attitude about people being human beings and not looking at people as color or race. They need to understand we are all humans. We all are children of God. And if we learn how and show love to one another, we can conquer hate. We won't see change in Oklahoma until the leadership in Washington quits promoting it at the national level. They're telling Oklahomans it's still okay to promote hate, and it's not.
Thank you, Twan.
Chris, was there a second part to your question, Chris Castile?
No, Scott, I think it would be interesting to hear from the CD2 chair on that, though, if he's still there.
I have to unmute. I'm sorry. There's no question that to use Twan's word, that there's hate and racism that still exists in this country and in particular Oklahoma. I think that we assume that there's always going to be a natural progression towards enlightenment in that regard, but it normally comes when there are events like, or circumstances like have recently developed. The 1950s and 1960s and the civil rights movement was a compressed period of time where there was a lot of change, and we may end up looking back at the latter part of the 2000 teens and the early part of the 2020s, or whatever you want to call this, as a time of recognition that we have this problem still, and that there are some steps that we need to take from the political leadership on down to other parts of society to correct it. It hasn't gone away. We may have been deluding ourselves in how much development there had been, or improvement there had been, but we need to refocus on the problem, and I'm glad that President Biden addressed it in his remarks.
Thank you.
We have a question from Donita. Donita, did you want to ask your question or just use it from the chat?
I'm with CNHI, and I'm really curious, what policies and plans does Biden have that will impact Western Oklahoma's agriculture and oil and gas industries? That's a big part of Western Oklahoma, and I'd like to know what you guys think about that.
I'm going to defer this question to Amber Jensen from Congressional District 3.
He actually has not announced a whole lot of his plans that will affect Northwestern Oklahoma. I've been watching for that. I know that a lot of the minimum wage type things will affect us. And I know that there has been mixed reaction because I'm a business owner. There's been mixed reaction between the people who are the workers and the people who are the business owners. But I myself, even being the business owner, will say that I am for Joe Biden's plan to raise the minimum wage. I believe that everyone should have a livable wage. No one should be in danger of not knowing where their next meal is coming from. I don't know what oil and gas is going to feel the effects of from his plans. I continue to watch for that daily. I don't know specifically what he's going to, like, a lot of things that happen as a result of the presidencies take a couple of years to reach Northwest Oklahoma, because we are a little slower to things are a little slower to reach us up here. So I will continue to watch out for that, and I will get with you, Donita.
And I want to follow up on that, what Amber said. And I absolutely don't know more than Amber as she lives in Western Oklahoma, but I will address the fact that out the gate, President Biden has been talking about access to affordable health care. And what I know about Western Oklahoma is that in the last 5 or 6 years, they've suffered a lot of hospital closings. And the sooner that we address the affordability of access to healthcare, access to affordable healthcare, we can stop the hemorrhaging of losing hospitals. In addition to, as Amber mentioned, everybody needs a livable wage, and Western Oklahoma for sure will be affected by that. Additionally, President Biden has talked about how he's going to renegotiate some of our trade compacts. And I know that some of the trade compacts that we have with China have directly affected our citizens in Western Oklahoma, particularly like our meat producers and our farmers. And those absolutely need to be renegotiated in order to help those folks be able to continue to make a living.
Just
oh, I absolutely agree.
I'm sorry. Just to clarify, you think Biden's policies will help save rural hospitals?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Donita. Chris Polanski, you had another question, sir?
I do. Thank you, Scott. This is addressed to anyone on the panel. I was just hoping anyone could talk about kind of the emotional impact, anything that really stood out from the ceremonies today that moved you, that you felt was really powerful. But just what was your emotional response to watching today's ceremony?
So I could talk forever, but I am going to kick it out to some of my co-panelists. Robbie, would you like to weigh in?
I would love to. Thanks, Alicia, and thanks for that question. I liked, I felt very comforted to see the orderliness of the ceremony in contrast to the, the focus on razor wire and soldiers and the images we've been bombarded with since the insurrection on the 6th. I felt very comforted by that. And I also felt very encouraged by the bipartisanness that we just haven't seen from our leaders in Washington. It was very, very comforting. And don't get me started on the poet laureate, but I'm sure someone else will.
Amanda, would you like to jump in there since it's another Amanda?
Sure. Well, I mean, I just loved seeing the historical day overall. As a young woman, I think that I've waited to see a moment like that take place in America my entire life. And it's beautiful to see women in America reach new heights in leadership. It was great to see the diversity that was there. I loved seeing a lot of the fashion there. I think that people in those positions try to send a lot of messages through what they wear on days like today. Yeah, the poet definitely struck a chord with me. Also, as an Oklahoman, seeing Garth Brooks show up was kind of interesting and exciting to see. That one I wasn't expecting, but it was nice to see a familiar face up there in him as well. Yeah, it was overall just a wonderful thing to watch. Kind of like Robbie said, it was a very comforting sight compared to what we've been seeing over the last few weeks.
So before I just finish in, I do want to give Amber a chance to say something and Dave a chance to say something. I'm going to, maybe not politically correct, but I'm going to ask ladies first. Amber, you want to say something?
Sure, thank you. For years, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I've been fighting for intersectional feminism. And so today meant a really big, a whole lot to me. To see Kamala Harris put her hand on that Bible and take that oath meant a lot to me. And to see an Oklahoman up there singing that song and to see that beautiful gown on Lady Gaga and, just watching the man who I was a delegate for, Joe Biden, up there becoming the president after all these months of campaigning for him. It was a lot. It was a whole lot of emotions. And the LGBTQ community is very near and dear to my heart. I volunteer for them outside of the Democratic Party and within the Democratic Party. And so just to know that his cabinet is a cabinet that looks like America and includes the LGBTQ community, that meant a lot to me and made me very emotional. I cried when I have been seeing his pics, and to know that he's signing those cabinet appointments, it's just amazing. Thank you.
Amber, Dave?
Yeah, thank you. And I would have a very difficult time, adding to what's been said. Y'all have covered it great. But today was particularly, good for me because I am a proud parent of 2 daughters who are persons of color. And of course, I was on the phone with them, making sure they were watching. And it's just so inspiring for them to see, Kamala being sworn in as vice president. And it was just great for them being females and people of color. And it was just, and they've had to live with, the oppression of being raised here in Oklahoma. And it was difficult at times. And there were times that I had to console them from, being treated differently, being treated less than, and I got to console them. So for me to get to experience this with them today was truly inspirational.
Madam Chair, can I add? And thank you for that question. To me, this was a very emotional day for me because I, again, get to go back to pick up tradition that I had before Trump. Every time the president would speak before Trump with my kids, I would say, hey, the president is getting ready to address the nation. Whatever you're doing, stop and pay attention to what the president is getting ready to say to the nation. They were always okay, Dad, regardless of whether they wanted to or not, I forced them and made them and explained to them how important the president's words are to a nation. For 4 years, I had to stop that tradition because I did not want them to hear anything Trump had to say to the nation because it was divisive. It was rhetoric that just was not nurturing for young kids in our nation. Now I am so excited that I can once again connect with my children and say, hey, look, the president of the United States is addressing the nation. You need to mark this and pay attention to what he says because he is our moral compass on the worldwide stage. So I was excited and I'm happy and I'm excited now. And thank you so much for that question because that is very important. We as a nation could go back to norms and traditions that we're used to.
So I just want to wrap up and say, emotionally, I started in my speech. I'm elated. I'm thrilled. I'm at peace. But there was a thing that President Biden said in his speech. He said, for those of you who didn't vote for me, hear me out and take measure of my head and my heart. That spoke to me because it made me feel like we have a president who recognizes that he is responsible for and responsible to all of America. And that adds to my peace, adds to my calm. It makes me feel better that we have a president who's not intent on sowing division and not intent on only representing those who pledge allegiance to a man versus our country.
Are there any other questions from our friends in the press? Okay, I just want to remind you that if you would like a copy of this recording, just drop me a note at scott@okdemocrats.org and I'll make sure you get that. And we thank you very much for spending.
Scott, there was one more question I saw.
There was?
Yeah, someone said they have a question.
McKenna Eubanks.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I do have a last minute question if that's okay.
Of course.
Well, Oklahoma has not had a mask mandate throughout this pandemic. And I know that's one thing that Joe Biden's been looking at, implementing at least a 100-day mask requirement. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on how that might impact here in Oklahoma specifically.
So that's kind of a loaded question there, McKenna, but we will answer that. So as a nation, we need a mask mandate. I mean, it's just, it has been proven to work. And until we can get enough vaccines in arms and get enough herd immunity, we need a mask mandate. And Oklahoma has proven, as recently as last night in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma has proven that we are not willingly going to do the right thing. We are not willingly just going to mask up. And so if it's going to take a national mandate, that's what we need to do in order to heal our nation. I smile, Robbie. Did you have anything you would like to add to that?
Oh, yeah, it is a loaded question. Thanks, Alicia. And thanks for that question. I As I said earlier, the basic science involved in masks is proven. There was a time not long ago when Tulsa reported having, I believe it was 60% of their COVID admissions were from towns surrounding Tulsa that did not have a mask mandate. And that's the kind of caring that you're going to see out of the Biden administration. And hopefully it will give our leadership in Oklahoma the cover it needs and the encouragement and maybe the push it needs to do the right thing to protect all of us.
So I want to say thank you to all of the press and media that came today. And obviously I thank the Oklahoma Democratic Party leadership for joining us as well. Thanks for coming and taking as much time as you had. I hope that we've answered your questions. And as Scott said, please, if you want a copy of the recording, drop your contact information in the chat or respond to the email that Angela Allman sent you. And we'll get you a copy of that and my speech as well. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia and Scott and everybody. Good to see you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Real quick, Scott, you said your email was scott@okdemocrats.com, correct?
.org.
.org. Thank you. Sorry, that was wrong.
Sure,
right,
Barry. Thanks for being here.
No worries. All right. I'd love a copy of the recording, so I'll email you. Thank you all.
Okay.
Alicia. Hello. Alicia gone? Oh, well. All right. See y'all. Hey, Robbie. Hey, John.